I want to take another question. There's a gentleman in the red shirt back there. He's had his hand up for a while. Come up to the microphone.
My question's for Deepak and the bishop. Now, you stated before that all belief is a cover-up for insecurity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If Deepak knew this to be a useful aspect, then shouldn't he have said that he didn't believe it, but knew it directly? There's a lot of spiritual nonsense out there, and a lot of spiritual clowns that propagate it for profit and self-promotion. One needs to be on guard and wary of these teachers and teachings, for their purpose and designs are not to help you unprogram and set yourself free, but only to confuse and bind you, so that you may become dependent and reliant on them, all the while validating the teaching, and possibly making the teacher rich and famous. This is a disgusting perversion of spirituality, to say the least, especially since spirituality is based in non-profit. Spirituality is not something on the supermarket shelf. It never should be put up for sale. If ever this is the case, it is a strong indication that the teacher and the teachings are spiritual hogwash. Do your part to set things right. If you ever encounter such a teacher, kiss his feet and then kick him in the balls. In this way, you will be appropriately returning the so-called favor given to you. So what are some of the red flags of spiritual hogwash? One good rule of thumb: if it ain't for free, it ain't worth a damn. Spiritual services offered in exchange for money, goods, and services are a spiritual disservice. If you feel compelled to spend your money in such a way, then sign up in a martial arts school. At least you'll be getting something useful out of it, and may even get some nuggets of wisdom along the way. Or take a yoga class. The only exception might be some of the ancient texts that don't have any strings attached. But even with these ancient tomes of wisdom, why buy them when you can check them out for free on the internet or in your local library? If you buy them, someone will be profiting off something that the original authors of these texts never meant to be profited from. And this is especially true specifically for these contemporary New Age products and systems available through modern gurus and mystics, the false purveyors of packaged spirituality. Don't spend a penny on this spiritual hogwash. Which means don't invest in their books, DVDs, seminars, retreats, workshops, or organizations. Your money would be far better spent in a casino. Beware of belief systems, proven methods, 12 easy steps, anything touted as absolute truth, salvation, or the only way, and above all, anyone or thing that tells you, I did it and now you can too. And for goodness sake, if a spiritual guru or guide or mystic tries to get into your pants and have sex with you, run like hell. This is not a spiritual teacher, but more of a glorified pimp. A genuine spiritual teacher has no expectations, requirements, applies no pressure, and doesn't give a damn if you question, improvise, modify, reject, disengage, or even quit. It's a no-strings-attached situation, and the only thing that should be exchanged is mutual respect. Another red flag of spiritual hogwash are mandatory superficial hallmarks that are pushed as requirements. This means dress codes, hairstyles, rituals, and demeanors. You don't need to be walking around in rags, robes, or suits, all in white or all in black, with any specific hats, staff, jewelry, flowers, or sandals. You don't need long hair, a shaved head, a long beard, or a mustache. You need not burn incense, make offerings, sacrifices, or prayers, or any other routine practices or recitals at specific times and situations. You don't need to be super happy, highly energetic and motivated, or overly silent, serious, and still. You are fine just the way you are to embark on your spiritual path. The path of no destination or acquired traits. Codes and conduct are in contradiction with spirituality, for spirituality deals in detachment and freedom from all things, which includes spirituality, knowledge, wisdom, enlightenment, and detachment itself. A path to freedom cannot lead to freedom if one cannot let go of the path that leads to freedom. And ultimately one will have to let go of freedom as well. Only then will you arrive to where you've always been. The here and now of an awareness that is nowhere, nobody, in no time and in no location. It's no thing and nothing, but cannot even be labeled as no thing and nothing. It is a total pure awareness outside of all settings, context, framework, narrative, perspective, borders, paradigms, or frame of reference. And even this is an inadequate description, because it is not something that can be described or related by any language, tool, or method of contextualization. It can only be experienced and nothing else. Everything else falls short. You can talk about it all day if you like, but to truly know it, there is no other way other than direct experience. And I know that I said earlier to beware when someone says there is only one way, but this is truly the only exception. Or at least that's the way it is right now. And unless this changes, the only way to directly experience something is to directly experience it. And the only way to indirectly experience something is to indirectly experience it. The point is that experience can only be experienced. Now, one of the things that commercial spiritualists utilize is keeping the student, or customer rather, locked in holding patterns. Anything they offer will be a limited treatment of a symptom, or a belief system that will bring superficial and material benefits. As long as they can keep people away from the fundamental essence and strung along with spiritual novelties, they will always be able to sell more and more of their crap. So I'd like to address some issues that these snake oil salesmen like to take advantage of. Issues that are generally confusing and keep prospective spiritualists in paradoxical conundrums, enabling the false mystical New Age guru the foundation to peddle their wares. So let's bring some clarity to these issues and hopefully take some steam out of this whole ridiculous Age of the Guru movement before it gets all out of control. What all these items share in common is taking a nugget of spiritual wisdom, injecting it with a bunch of hot air and ambiguity, leading a prospective spiritualist nowhere, and thereby strengthening the dependence on a guru. The first item is detachment. They will tell you that it's important to detach from attachments, but by doing so, detachment will become just another attachment, bringing you right back to where you started. Makes you kind of wonder what the point is, right? What people should be wondering is, why is this guru even bothering to speak? Clarification. It is important to detach from all things in order to strip away everything that you are not, in order to discover everything that you are. And this also includes detaching from detachment as well. This means utilize tools of freedom to liberate yourself from delusion, then discard the tools of freedom. Basic, simple, no confusion. The next item is change. They will tell you that everything is change, nothing stops changing. The only constant is change, and yet there is nothing to change. Nice advice, don't you think? What the guru doesn't want changed is his position on a pedestal. Clarification. The only constant that doesn't change, produces all change, and needs no changing or fixing is your fundamental essence. And yet people have seemingly become disconnected from this essence by the delusions established through attachments, identifications, and associations with the changes. This is the conditioning of false self. An identification that insulates from pure essence creates illusion and delusion, and subsequently leads people to the suffering and confusion that compels them to seek spirituality and thereby a guru. To think that to establish intimacy with the total pure awareness that you really are from the standpoint of a mountain of programming, conditioning, attachments, and false identifications involves no changing is a complete and utter fallacy. Clarification. Reductionism, detaching, stripping away all the things that you are not, unprogramming, unconditioning, unlearning, and disassociating are all elements of change, albeit superficial change, to enable arrival to what you really are, the fundamental essence, that which is constant and needs no changing. For a guru to tell someone lost in illusion that they need not change anything is basically telling one to kick back, relax, and accept the illusion and suffering. And this, of course, indirectly implies that the only solace to be found is sitting around and listening to the guru blow a lot of empty hot air. If you have found yourself disconnected from your pure essence, reconnecting with it will involve a change. But of course, this is something the guru doesn't want you to accomplish. For if you ever do reconnect with your fundamental true nature, you will have absolutely no more use or need for a guru. The next item is selflessness. They will tell you that although selflessness is a key aspect, the motivations and endeavors of selflessness are inherently selfish. So if it's selfish to be selfless, then again, what's the point, right? This seems to justify our materialistic, hedonistic, desirous tendencies, does it not? And what a better way to keep one continually lost in deluded distinctions and thereby continually reliant on a guru. Clarification. Selflessness can be a beneficial practice in that it helps bolster detachment by enabling one to become accustomed with causes without expectations, recognition, accolades, reciprocation, gratification, or glorification. So the root objective of selflessness is detachment, not to cultivate spiritual superiority, gain favor with God and the universe, or to build up good karma. So it is key that the selflessness be genuinely selfless. Otherwise, it is a complete waste of time. The second selflessness becomes grounded in selfishness, it might as well be abandoned. Better for one to be flat out selfish than selfish under the guise of selflessness. But then comes the question of, isn't everything we do selfish? After all, we are selves, and anything we can possibly engage in will be in relation to a self. On the surface it would appear so, but since this character that we associate a self with is not the essence of what we are, then there is no substantial separated self to be selfish to begin with. This is the distinction of separation that fosters illusion through the attachment to the delusion. Bottom line, your endeavors can be defined as selfish if they contribute in any way to support division and separation. Your endeavors can be defined as selfless if they contribute to the breaking down of division and separation and lead the way to oneness, wholeness, and the source of all things. And even though the oneness is one, there is no selfishness due to the lack of a distinction of a self. Selfishness only exists within the distinctions of separation, which give rise to the idea of a self. The next item is desire. They will tell you that desire will lead to suffering, which would seem to indicate that one could save themselves a whole lot of pointless trouble by avoiding desire altogether to begin with. Yet at the same time, they will tell you that desire and suffering can act as the springboard to propel you to enlightenment. So then what is the point of not indulging in desire? We might as well dive in head first. It is not a mandatory prerequisite that we must hit rock bottom before we can rise up, and this should be made clear. Otherwise, it only serves as justification to linger and dwell in illusion. Why not shoot heroin, guzzle booze all day, rape, rob, murder, and pillage? 'Cause after all, we are working on our enlightenment, right? Spiritual hogwash. Yet another aspect that keeps people lost and needy on a guru. Believe it or not, things can be learned on a small scale and translated into a bigger lesson. One need not learn to be careful around animals by being mauled by a bear. One can learn this from a small scratch by a cat. One need not learn about loss by squandering a fortune. One can learn this from the misplacement of a small sentimental item. One not need to learn the dangers of height by falling off a tall ladder and breaking every bone in their body. One can learn this by tripping over a tree root and scraping their knee. A good spiritual teacher worth their salt would try to contrive the situations that would impart the large-scale wisdom on a small scale. But not the spiritual businessman. These scam artists need people to be mired in desire and defilement in order to sell more books and DVDs. Clarification. If you can steer away from desire, then do so while you have the chance. In this way, enlightenment can be experienced easily, fluidly, and seamlessly, than by way of the defiled depths of suffering and delusion. If you can step over a deep pit by simply stepping over it, then simply step over it. Wouldn't this be more wise than falling down the deep pit, hurting yourself, and then having to scratch and claw your way all the way back up to the top just to reach the spot you could have reached by simply stepping over it? Now granted, there will be some that will need to fall down and sink deep in order to rise up, but this is an exception rather than a rule. Now, you might have noticed that throughout this talk about spiritual hogwash and deceptive gurus, that the main focus has been on the New Age aspects with no mention of organized religion. This is mainly due to the fact that religion is not spirituality, but an example of what spirituality can become if twisted and perverted to the extreme. When one is no longer exploring, questioning, observing, experiencing, following intuition, and connecting with their pure essence, and instead is focusing on teachers, dogma, rituals, traditions, dress, and demeanor as what is most important, they have fully abandoned spirituality. This is when one is content to be ruled, distrusts their own experience, finds security in routines, and awaits salvation from some external source. This is when a bird in the hand is worth less than two in the bush. An eye for an eye and pie in the sky. Shepherd and the sheep and the dogma runs deep. Believe as you're told to move up in the fold. The world of organized religion. Spiritual hogwash gone berserk. If what you seek is domination, hierarchy, superiority, belief systems, righteousness, absolute dogmatic truths, and self-important glorification, then you will be a perfect Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, or Scientologist. And of course, just as with the contemporary New Agers, the priests, imams, rabbis, gurus are what is most important. Kiss the Pope's ring, bow down to the prophets, and await the chosen one. Only these men can guide you and save you. Without them, you will be lost. But hey, this is easy. You don't have to take any responsibility. If you have faith, hope, and believe hard enough, you will be carried to salvation and enlightenment. Hey, let's listen in.
I'm flying on Aeroflot from Delhi to Moscow. The flight attendants are preparing the passengers. I'm sitting there surveying the scene. I see some people are reading spiritual books they might have acquired on their tour. When the person sitting next to me leans over and he says, "I don't believe in gurus or reading books. I think you create your own reality. You know, I heard from this one teacher, actually, you don't need a teacher. And I read this one book that said, you don't need to read books." I turned to him and I said, how would you feel if on the public address, the pilot came on and said something like this to the passengers? Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you aboard the flight this evening. I think you might want to know, I've never flown an aircraft before. I've never undergone any sort of training. I don't rely upon a navigator. Actually, I believe flying is really an intuitive thing. You just got to trust yourself, believe in yourself, and envision your destination. I'd get off the flight immediately. Arrogance, bravado is the opposite of spiritual culture. So, don't you think it's even more critical choice to make who's going to pilot your soul?
Yeah, what was that guy thinking? Was he thinking? Of course he was thinking, and that's the problem. Thinking. Spirituality has nothing to do with thinking, but rather what comes to you when you stop thinking. First of all, the guy on the plane wasn't saying anything out of intuitive insight because he read in a book that you don't need to read books, and somebody told him that you don't need a guru. So actually, according to the logic presented here, he is being a good spiritual student by regurgitating what he read and what he was told. But that's besides the point. Second of all, let's finally put to rest once and for all this silly argument that if you want to learn how to become a chef, you go to an experienced chef. If you want to learn how to become a carpenter, you go to an experienced carpenter. If you want to learn how to become a pilot, you go to an experienced pilot. So logically, if you want to become an enlightened spiritualist, you go to a master guru, right? Spiritual hogwash. Spirituality is unlike anything else in the world. It is not a job, a skill, or a profession. Spirituality is not a trade school. The core foundation of spirituality is wisdom gained through experiences with intuition and our pure essence. And it's not bravado or arrogance that people are starting to recognize this. That is, if they are truly recognizing it through their intuition. If they are simply believing it because they were told to, then perhaps it is arrogant. But this arrogance doesn't even come close to the arrogance of the majority of the masters and gurus out there, sitting on a pedestal, dressed up, or in some cases dressed down, to play a part with costumes, adornments, and spiritual paraphernalia, talking to people from some lofty position, telling them what they should or should not believe, accepting offerings and assuming the role of an exalted, superior, transcendent, enlightened spiritual master. And people are not supposed to recognize this as arrogance because it's shrouded under a guise of gentle, humble calmness. Spiritual hogwash. Understand that anything in the world, be it carpentry, plumbing, archery, blacksmithing, artistry, alchemy, healing, cooking, juggling, sewing, hunting, gardening, farming, fighting, or fishing, or anything else that you can think of, was at some point first learned by someone through intuition. How do you think all these things came into being? Oh, let me guess. They were handed to us by divine celestial gods and deities, right? Spiritual hogwash. We may have indeed been influenced by extraterrestrials and psychoactive plants, but it was only an influence, not an instructional how-to tutorial walkthrough. And even nowadays, with all the masters of craft out there, do you think that nobody learns anything by intuition anymore? Tell that to Jimi Hendrix, who never took a guitar lesson and turned out to be one of the greatest guitar players of all time. But anyway, spirituality is not about learning. It is about unlearning. So you have it completely twisted if you assume there's anything to think, learn, or believe in spirituality. Now, after all of this, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that teachers and teachings are worthless or useless. On the contrary, they can be very beneficial and helpful, but only so if they facilitate the detachment that will foster independent exploration and discovery. The true stuff of wisdom. If they enable attachments to them, then they are completely useless, because the wisdom of experience will not translate through dependence on text, spoken words, thinking, rituals, and belief systems. In the absence of all these things, there will be spiritual growth, with or without teachers and teachings. Only you can walk your path, and no one else can walk it for you. A man can utilize tools, but it is not the tools that get the job done. The job gets done by the man utilizing the tools. A hammer can be useful to a man if he employs it when it is necessary and puts it away when it is not required. A hammer will be a burden to the man if he worships it, thinks about it constantly, builds belief systems around it, and carries it around with him at all times, trying to employ it as the right tool for every job. And this ties into another important point. Unlike years past, mankind now has access to a lot of modern useful tools that will provide him access to information and knowledge much faster and more efficiently than the men of the past. This is why reliance on gurus and pilgrimages are becoming a thing of the past. It's not New Age spirituality that is changing this, but the fact that we are indeed actually emerging into a new age. Just the internet alone has blown the doors off the traditional ways of the past. Now more and more people are beginning to see what the Buddha was signaling towards. That we must explore and experience our worlds for ourselves through all means available and discover for ourselves what works. And if we can do this through naked, innocent eyes, meaning freedom from discriminations, opinions, judgments, and relative subjective distinctions, then we will surely arrive to the truth of pure essence, one way or another, not by what we've read or what we've been told, but through raw experience. Only you can do this. No one, and I mean no one, can pilot your soul. The soul, another ambiguous aspect of spiritual hogwash. There is no soul. There is only awareness. If you follow awareness and nothing else, how can you possibly ever be misguided?